If I'm being honest, I've been scared of making this video. Videos like this are never necessary, but for myself, they're the most important ones I make. Sometimes I find it easier to open up, sometimes I find it harder. This happens to be the latter, so I hope you give the entire video a watch or listen. I value being open, honest, and candid with all of you because it can open up a lot of important discourse between myself and you, the viewer, amongst yourselves as a community, or most importantly, those who unknowingly find it as an opportunity to self-reflect if things I talk about resonate with them. If you've followed my content for some time, you'll know I deal with chronic mental health issues, so raising awareness and reducing stigma around all of it is what I believe to be the greatest gift this YouTube journey has given me. But if I'm being honest, these are also the hardest videos for me to make. It means I have to fully put my thoughts and feelings to words, which not only leaves me vulnerable for all of you watching this to see and hear, but makes said thoughts and feelings that much more real for me, if that makes sense. I'll be reading from this script I wrote the majority of the time because otherwise I'd leave things out that I would have wanted to mention, and it's easier for me to make sure my thoughts are more coherent. Now, I'd promised you guys an update video after my jaw surgery last year, almost 2 years, July 2024, and I had every intention of doing so. I mean, this text document is titled December 2024 Vlog. But I had a hard time reconciling my time spent during recovery, and as time passed trying to write everything down, I had other things come up that I wanted to share with you all, but that meant I had more and more things I wanted to say and update you on, which made this video bigger and bigger, and by extension, more daunting and, frankly, scary. So perhaps I'll share more about the jaw surgery in a later video, although I do want to thank everyone who sent letters and their stories for me to read during that time. They meant the world to me, truly. But for now, there's something I'd rather share with you all. A single discovery that's been occupying my mind for over a year now. I have autism. More specifically, ADHD, which is a combination of both autism and ADHD. My ADHD diagnosis was discovered only a few years ago, and I thought that I had finally found an answer to all the questions I had. However, I felt that there still seemed to be more to my experience that I couldn't put my finger on. But now I've found more of those answers within the spectrum. Admittedly, I've had a hard time coming to terms with the whole thing. And to be clear, ADHD isn't autism plus ADHD. It's a completely different neurotype. It's not as if it's half of two things, but fully something else. It also seems that it's only recently started to be recognized as a different neurotype, and because of this, a lot of it is still unknown. With that said, I consider myself very lucky to be living during a time where there's at least a label to put on it, and I know that we'll only come to understand it better and better as time passes. It's also why I've had such a hard time making this video, because I want to be very clear that I have not been clinically diagnosed with ADHD. My therapist was the one to connect the dots, someone who also happens to be clinically diagnosed as ADHD, and has no doubts that I show many signs of being on the spectrum. But to me, that didn't feel like it was enough. I'm always very careful to not claim to be something I'm not, especially since I know in recent times it's become somewhat of a trend online to boldly declare you suffer from certain things without any medical professional input, and on no other basis than some TikTok saying that if you do or experience this one thing, then you must be or have that thing. This ends up not only being dangerous, but diminishes the experiences and validity of those who actually do have and suffer from those things. So essentially for the past year, I've had major imposter syndrome, constantly gaslighting and doubting myself, and therefore wanted to be very careful about what I said. Getting a formal diagnosis is a bit complicated, and from what I've also learned, it isn't foolproof. You typically go for several different in-person sessions with a professional who will analyze, observe, and question you. But the tricky part of it is that the older you are, the harder of a time you'll have getting diagnosed. there's a good chance they'll notice the things they're trained to look for less often, because adults have gotten really good at masking by that point in their life. They've learned how to mask to the point that they can get by and seemingly blend in with society in day-to-day life so much so that they may never even realize they're masking. And wouldn't you know it, they're talking about someone like myself. After talking about ADHD and looking into it further, I had a jarring, abrupt realization. With no other way I can think to explain it, it's as if there's two parts within me, my masked self and my unmasked self. And for the first time in my life, they noticed each other. Like they were looking in a mirror, but this time the reflection wasn't the same. And I haven't been the same since. I started to realize just how often I masked and all the different masks I would put on. But still, it felt like I wasn't valid in thinking any of this because I didn't have a medical professional officially diagnose me, as if that would make all the difference. To have someone else validate my experiences, maybe that would be enough. But conversely, what if I went in and didn't get the official diagnosis? What if I didn't reach the threshold that determines if I am or am not? I was afraid that that would only make matters worse because if that did happen, my brain would think that clearly I must be wrong in viewing my own experience because one professional said so. It wasn't until recently that my therapist told me, and he said it was fine if I quote him, "Your experiences matter more than your diagnosis." That really hit home for me. No one knows me as well as I know myself, and most importantly, no one can experience the same things I experience. I shouldn't worry about whether I'm right or wrong for experiencing the things the way that I do. And in the case of something like an autism diagnosis, it can be tricky. For my understanding, you have to hit a certain score to be diagnosed so that they can differentiate how much it impacts a person day to day and how much assistance they might require. I believe they're trying to do away with the terms high functioning, low functioning, etc. But it's clear I don't need assisted living. But what I had to remind myself of is that doesn't mean that the challenges I face don't affect me every single day of my life, because they very much do. The medical understanding of the spectrum has also changed significantly as time has passed. It used to be a yes or no, black or white. You are or you're not. But now it's more about the degree or level to which you are or aren't. It's not binary. It doesn't just go left to right. In fact, I've had two great metaphors used to explain the spectrum to me that perhaps will also help you understand it a little better. Imagine a gas stovetop with a bunch of burners. Each one of those burners represents different parts of the spectrum. Multiple burners would fall under certain umbrellas like social communication and interaction, but individually, a single burner might represent something like difficulty understanding social cues, lack of eye contact, or trouble initiating or maintaining conversations. You'd have several relating to the restricted and repetitive behaviors umbrella, like an intense focus on a narrow interest, strong adherence to routines, and distress over changes or sensory sensitivities, so on and so forth. Each individual stovetop would look different because each burner would be set to varying degrees of intensity. Some completely turned off. Some might be as high as they can go, while the others could be anywhere and everywhere in between, meaning no autistic person's stovetop would look the same. There would be pockets of varying intensity all over the stove that couldn't be accurately captured by a single line. Another example, if it's easier to visualize, is the same idea, but imagine a sound mixer. Each slider that normally controls different audio tracks and inputs would instead signify parts of the spectrum the same way the burners did. You'd have all these different sliders, all at different positions, and it wouldn't be ordered from lowest position to highest position because every individual and their experience is different. Something to keep in mind, though, especially when it comes to the spectrum, is that there are specific things or signs that some people might identify with. In fact, I'd wager almost everyone could find something that could relate to somewhere in the spectrum, no matter how specific. The difference in when it's diagnosable is how many things within the spectrum describe the person and to what degree it affects them in their daily life. Now, I say all of that to try and qualify what I have to talk about because I never take mental health lightly and want to make sure you know that. Which brings me to my experience. Once I started looking more into ADHD, it became much more clear what I struggled with that weren't normal things to struggle with. Without someone else to point these things out to tell me what they should or shouldn't look like, it's easy to go through life looking at everyone else and assuming they're experiencing things the same way that I am, but must be managing them better, when in reality, that's not the way it works. I've been trying to get better at reminding myself of that, but admittedly, it frustrates me. It frustrates me knowing that there are all these things that to me feel like mountains to climb, but to others, it'd be something so unnoteworthy that it wouldn't even register. It's not that I think it's unfair. I'm just frustrated with or at my brain, and I'm trying to figure out how to work with it instead of fighting it. After all, these are the cards I've been dealt in life, and there's no use in thinking about what if it were different, because it's not. So the question I've been trying to answer for as long as I can remember, why is, frankly, everything hard to do? And I mean that. Everything I do feels like it completely drains me. But now I think I've finally found my answer, even if it's not the answer I would have liked. What I mean is that I was always holding on to hope that whatever it was temporary, a problem that once identified could be worked through or treated permanently. Instead, I learned that it's simply something that's a part of who and what I am. On a fundamental level, it's just how my brain is wired. I was initially resistant to the idea because there's been a lot of stigma around autism, and it never helped that I wasn't well educated on the subject. When it was brought up to me over a year ago, I wasn't convinced. But then it began to make more and more sense once they explained to me what ADHD actually looks like. And when I thought about it, I realized this wasn't the first time the idea that I might be on the spectrum was brought to my attention. The first time was nearly 10 years ago. I didn't really know what to do with that information since I knew little in regards to what autism could actually look like, so I brushed it off. Since then, I've had a few other professionals make passing remarks, but I never gave it much more thought until specifically a year ago, because for the first time, someone explained to me why they brought up autism, the spectrum, and how it related to what they were seeing or hearing from me in my experience. And what I've come to realize is, although it's not something you can just treat with medication, I can learn more about it and develop better coping skills so that I feel like I'm more in control of my own life, because frankly, right now, I feel like I have very little control over my life. I often feel as if I'm a passenger to my own life. I find putting to words what it feels like when I'm struggling, my experience, to be very difficult, if not at times impossible. However, my wife showed me a TikTok one day that really resonated with me. So I want to talk about some points and examples he makes, because through his words, I can more accurately detail my experience. So I'd like to thank @KyleCox on TikTok for his video that went over the ADHD experience and why it's that duality of opposite forces that constantly make things harder, because it really helped me. And perhaps in turn, this will help some of you put to words how you feel and what you experience. So I'm going to repeat or quote things that resonated with me the most. My brain craves routine while destroying it, seeking stimulation while being overwhelmed by it. I need people, but people exhaust me. My autism has systematizing intelligence. It sees patterns, creates orders, and needs predictability. But my ADHD brain has exploratory intelligence. It seeks novelty, breaks pattern, and creates chaos. Two truly opposing forces. It's like running two operating systems that were never meant to work together. And because of that, they cancel each other out in the most exhausting way possible. When I'm masking twice. I'm hiding my autism in ADHD spaces because I'm too rigid, while I'm hiding my ADHD in autism spaces because I'm too chaotic. I feel like I don't fit anywhere because I'm everything. In the video, he says, the energy it takes to be in any space is double what anyone else expends. And that would explain so much for myself. My sensory processing is complex. My autism makes me hypersensitive to stimuli, but my ADHD makes me seek stimulation. I need noise, but not that noise. Touch, but not that touch. I can think of so many times in my life where people have been confused about what I like or don't like, or what I need and don't need, because I have such specific stimulation needs that are so variable. Things like food, sound, touch. I'm very picky about textures and how clothes feel and fit, for instance. My brain is sensory seeking and sensory avoiding simultaneously. My autism wants to process feelings systematically for emotional regulation, but my ADHD makes them hit all at once. I think this is partly why I struggle with emotions, and that can lead to meltdowns and hyperactivity, shutdowns, and impulsivity. I'll talk more about that and my shutdowns later. I deal with rejection-sensitive dysphoria while also having alexithymia. I feel everything and nothing, often in the same hour. This still confuses me because I can feel like completely different people within such a short period of time, and I never had any way to explain why. My autism needs social scripts, but my ADHD impulsivity breaks them. I interrupt because of my ADHD, then spiral because autism knows that was wrong. I want deep connections, but can't maintain consistent contact. I love people deeply, but forget they exist when they're not in front of me. If you're a friend or family member of mine, you know this one all too well. It's never personal and never my intention. But there was a pleasant surprise towards the end of the video, points I hadn't found anyone bring up elsewhere, where he talks about ways my brain operates differently in a beneficial capacity. I have abilities neither condition alone provides, like greater pattern recognition combined with pattern breaking, allowing me to create innovative solutions. I remember when my wife was working on her master's degree, she needed to proctor part of an IQ test, so she used me as her guinea pig. When she gave the finished test to her teacher, she asked who she had tested because the pattern recognition score were off the charts. And I guess this would explain it. I have hyperfocus with autism's intensity and ADHD's creativity, which, for myself, has been on full display for the past 11 years here on YouTube. I don't think I would have managed otherwise. My work style is unique. I need routine, but will die if it's boring. This certainly causes challenges, but it also means I can operate in a manner others can't really make sense of. I can be excellent in a crisis because my ADHD thrives while my autism rapidly synthesizes solutions. I've experienced this a few times. Funnily enough, though, when I think of a potential crisis, I don't imagine myself to rise above the occasion and chaos, but it's almost like a switch gets flicked when it actually happens, and suddenly I'm cool, calm, and collected. But ask me to maintain something steady, and my brain would rather shut down entirely. Just look at my YouTube channel and the content I've done for more evidence of that painfully obvious fact. He said, "You're not high functioning or low functioning. You're inconsistently functioning based on which part of your brain is driving." His example was that Tuesday me and Thursday me might be completely different people, and I immediately resonated with that. Many times I've wondered if it was something like bipolar. I felt crazy that I could swing and appear to myself and others so differently, so rapidly. What works Monday might be torture Wednesday. And believe me, I get this. There could be something that works for me for 100 days, no problem, but randomly on that 101st day, it becomes almost repulsive. And to make it worse, there's never a rhyme or reason to how long something will work until it doesn't. It could be a day, it could be a month, it could be a year, but I have no idea when it just ends. He closes the video out though by saying, "Your brain isn't broken. It's playing jazz while everyone else is playing classical. Your exhaustion is real. Your struggles are valid." And to be honest with you all, while I was preparing this video and rewatching that TikTok, that last bit broke me. Your exhaustion is real. Your struggles are valid. For whatever reason, I keep trying to tell myself that I don't have these experiences, and I'm just not handling things well enough. I must be making all of this up. But having someone else say those few simple words felt so validating, and for lack of a better way to put it, I felt seen. It's so hard for me to put to words what I feel, how I feel, and what I experience. Yet this person, without knowing who I am or that I even exist, put to words a lot of what I deal with in ways I couldn't. And I mean that rather literally. Lately, I've been trying to reference and work with something called a feelings wheel during different times of the day because I have such a hard time identifying what I'm actually feeling. Turns out I have a bad relationship with most emotions. I can't really tell you how I'm feeling because I don't even know myself. Which reminds me of my usually emotionless expression. To many of you watching, that might come as a surprise, but I am typically very hard to read and don't show much emotion on my face. Majority of the time, I'm actively thinking about my lack of expression, and then I need to mask it, and obviously when I record for content, I do my best to counteract that. That's why it's hard for me to do the best that I can today, because I'll make concessions on content or streams occasionally where I'll have less energy and put up less masks, and without fail, I get comments like, "Is everything okay? You look tired," or "You look really sad." When really, I might actually be more content than usual, but you wouldn't know that just looking at me. My wife still has a hard time with this and jokes about my expressionless face because she's right. And it's not that she's laughing at me. I know she's laughing with me. And I can't tell you how thankful I am to have such an understanding and loving partner to share my life with. I also have a myriad of repeated behaviors that I do, some consciously, some subconsciously, to soothe myself. Day to day, I have various tics, mostly facial and muscular, that are usually subtle enough that they're easily missed on camera, but if you've ever seen me eat, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The tics get cranked up to max when I eat, and I couldn't tell you why. I also count. I count my steps all the time, everywhere I go, and in multiples of 4. And typically, I need to complete these multiples of 4 before a certain marker I've set to satisfy my brain. If I'm driving on the highway as I pass between light poles, I need to only take a certain number of breaths in between each one at a certain cadence in multiples of 4. I also have this weird one where sometimes I'll see a word or phrase and it's just stuck in my head, and I have to keep spelling it out as if I'm texting on a T9 cell phone. Why? I don't know. So if the word fruit were stuck in my head, I'd imagine pressing every key on my cell phone until I have the combination, and then I'd repeat it over and over. So for fruit, it'd be 333-777-884448. 333-777-884448. 333-777-884448. 333-777, over and over and over again. But I never really considered them as self-soothing until I noticed them during my shutdowns. Or maybe you could call them meltdowns. It doesn't matter. Either way, rarely there are times where I can get so overwhelmed that I just sort of short circuit. It feels as if at that moment, all parts of me and my brain are trying to drive at the same time. I usually start crying uncontrollably, and although I try to make it stop, it's at those moments I feel like a spectator to my own life the most. During these moments, I'll be doing various repeated behaviors, but specifically, I began to notice that I'd always be using one hand to draw a circle. Nowadays, whenever I catch myself drawing a circle, without a doubt, I know it's a telltale sign that I'm beginning to get overwhelmed and to try and course correct before I get to that shutdown moment. There's also other things I struggle with, like eye contact, rigidity with how things need to be, hard time shifting focus without it being jarring, etc. You don't need me to go into every detail, plus I'm still figuring out what parts of me stem from ADHD. But for a while, I couldn't shake this idea that there's something wrong with me. This self-narrative on endless repeat saying that I'm broken. I've been working to shake that idea because what exactly is normal anyway? Just like when I first learned I had ADHD years back, it began to make sense why listening to other people's advice almost always proved unhelpful. That advice is coming from someone whose brain is wired to operate differently than mine. And so what works for them doesn't work for me. Now I'm able to frame my life through the lens of ADHD. Still, I can't entirely shake the feeling like I don't belong. Like, so few people actually understand my experience and the struggles I face, making it harder to not feel like an outsider. Perhaps that's why in that TikTok, the few words that validated my experience hit so hard. That feeling of not belonging worsens when I constantly see other creators, new or not, who are doing more, juggling more, energized more, and more sure of what they want to do and where they're headed. I couldn't feel more the opposite. Comparisons help nobody, but it creates this disconnect in my head of what or who I'd like to be and what I'm actually capable of. I talked to one of my friends who also makes YouTube videos about this topic before because I asked them how they manage to do everything they do. They have a wife, kids, hobbies, friends, and they juggle it pretty effortlessly. That, to me, seems like such a foreign concept. And honestly, they replied that it's a lot easier to manage it all without crippling depression. That's why I try to remind myself that we only see what others put out there, and not the issues they may or may not face behind the scenes. I've been working on being better at affording myself grace. Instead of blaming myself or hating myself for who I am, trying to accept myself when I often face the disconnect between what I want to do and what I can do. Realizing that it's possible to do my best, even if that means that the end result doesn't turn out how I imagined. As I'm learning more about all of this, I'm beginning to better understand why I do certain things. And while I now have an answer, still kind of sucks. It sucks to me because it feels like an excuse having to explain to someone why I do what I do or why I struggle not doing what I want to do. Especially with YouTube and content creation. I've found it's harder to stream because I can't keep to a schedule, but the irony is I would love a schedule. But I can't keep to a schedule for various reasons, including my energy, motivation, mental, and emotional state are always changing, always lagging behind where I'd like them to be. This also goes for creating content with others, since I find it hard to rise to the occasion. I can't force myself to turn on Mr. Fruit, if that makes sense. Not to mention the social anxiety of meeting new people, but that's a whole other thing. I've also tried to make Mr. Fruit not reflect how I'm personally feeling because I think it can end up creating content that's not as entertaining or a product I'm not happy with. Trying to think and plan future content also feels impossible because I can only ever handle and wrap my head around what's right in front of me. I work in small timelines, and the bigger the project, the more paralyzed I feel. But what really worries me is that all of this seems to be getting worse as the years go by. Though, perhaps, I might have also found an answer to that too. Burnout. It's not the first time you've heard me talk about burnout, but now I believe it's a more specific type of burnout, not just the general burnout. Rather, burnouts. Both autistic and ADHD burnout. A double whammy. Every day feels like I'm treading water. Every decision, every thought, every action is exhausting. It just keeps compounding. I'm too busy struggling to look right in front of me, to try and remain present day to day, that I can't look towards the future or reflect on the past. There's almost nothing automatic about my day. Instead, I have to actively choose and execute every little part of my day, and that builds up so quickly that by every evening I'm spent. There's almost no processing power to allow me to do anything, no matter how much I would like to. And there's almost no such thing as building a habit in my life, because no matter how hard I try to make something automatic, it almost never happens. Or if it feels like it nears that point, it quickly changes. For instance, I have a hard time explaining to my wife why sometimes I can't shower, because the thought of showering can be exhausting. I play through every step of the process in my head, and imagine how much energy and time it'll take, and it's paralyzing. I think about how long it'll take to walk to the bathroom, to remember to turn on the water early to warm it up, take off all my clothes, grab the towel, get in the shower, walk through the process of the shampoo, conditioner, soap, etc., because I have to do it in a specific order and in a specific way every time. And this continues all the way until the moment I'm out of the shower, dried off, clothed, and fully done. That's how I view almost everything. And if I haven't done something before and I don't have a memory bank to pull from, it can make it even worse or harder to hurdle over, because suddenly I'm unable to play through the scenario in my head, and that scares me. All of this leads to prolonged stress that continues to compound as I try to navigate daily life. And mind you, this is with a job where I get to work from home and choose my own schedule. I genuinely don't know where I'd be if YouTube never worked out, because I don't know where I would be able to function or what I'd be able to handle and for how long. Not to mention the masking. I mentioned it briefly before, but I've come painfully aware of how much I mask. It's at the point that I'm struggling to understand what or who the real me is, since I've masked for so long and used it like a social playbook crutch, that I don't know how to function without them, yet in a twist of fate, they're so much harder to maintain now. It's like a veil has been lifted, and I see everything that I didn't see before, but I don't know what to do with this. I'm stuck in between, and I'm constantly at war with myself. Feels like, in The Emperor's New Groove, when Kronk has the angel Kronk and devil Kronk on both of his shoulders with opposing views and opinions. Yeah. I can be in a social setting, and it's never-ending thoughts about doing too much, not doing enough, trying to allow myself to just exist unmasked, but then judging myself for what my unmasked self looks like. It doesn't help that a lot of the people I normally hang around with will make remarks asking if I'm okay or that something seems different. And I don't blame them at all, because to them, it is different. I am different. But then it feels like this unmasked version of myself is wrong or not what people want. Or worse, that I've sold myself as a lie to everyone I know and love. I'm very fortunate, though, that my wife knows all the versions of me, is the only one who gets to really see the unmasked me and loves all of me just the same. And I'm beginning to learn that a lot of these masks are a part of who I am. And sometimes who I am just looks different. The imposter syndrome extends to here on YouTube as well. Feeling like I'm incapable of being what I think Mr. Fruit should be, or perhaps was at one point, and afraid that a different looking Mr. Fruit would drive everyone away. Frustrated that I can't engage with the things I love with the way I want to. There's so much more that I like or want to do with content, but I never get there because I struggle to maintain what I do as is. And ultimately, I feel lost in terms of my passion. Or perhaps passion isn't the right word. The best way I can explain it is that I still love content creation and making videos, but that's no longer enough to keep me going, if that makes sense. And I can't seem to figure out what will keep me going. The thing that not only moves me, but pushes me into the right direction. I do know things that, like monetary or analytical goals and achievements, aren't enough to give me purpose. At one point, I think they were enough to mask underlying issues under the guise of success, telling myself that that's what makes me productive and worthwhile. But it appears I need some internal motivating factor that I'm struggling to find. It doesn't help that when I'm having a hard time, instinctively, I want to completely recoil from the world. It makes it hard to make content or appear public facing. I don't post on social media. I can't do what I can't do. That's why I love the movie theater. In there, I don't have to interact with anyone. The rest of the world is quite literally shut out, with the dark room only be illuminating by the movie I'm watching. And it's one of the few things that can singularly hold my mind's attention. So for those 2 hours or so, I'm not thinking about anything else. It's a true escape. Feeling like I'm constantly lost also leads me to feel frustrated because I rarely feel content. In fact, I'm not even sure I know what that feels like. After all, I have a beautiful, loving, thoughtful, and empathetic wife, 2 wonderful dogs, a roof over my head, the ability to afford bills and feed me and my family. I'm in relatively good shape, try to exercise often, eat healthier, I have caring friends and a loving family, and yet I still don't feel content. It continues to feel like something is missing and that I'm not enough. Doesn't help that autism, ADHD, and depression all love to commingle. A lot of this also stems from the things I mentioned I struggle with. No matter what I decide to do during my day, there's always this part of me fighting it. I'll know I want to do this thing I'm doing while simultaneously feeling like what I'm doing isn't right and that we should be doing something else. Every day is a battle of choice paralysis. But no matter what I do, those two parts of me never agree. I can't just tell myself I'm going to do something and be happy with it. It's exhausting because imagine fighting yourself every second of every day. As if every time you tried to take a step forward, you're simultaneously pushing against a force trying to make you step backwards. Honestly, I'm tired. I'm really, really tired. More than anything, I feel like that's one of the biggest hurdles. I just want to find a way to not be completely drained and exhausted day to day. Thinking back to years past, it felt like life wasn't always this hard, and to a degree it's true. It's once life began to demand more and more of me, and I no longer had the same support systems you have growing up, but the world became so heavy and burdensome. When I finally realized this, that the world wasn't built around the way someone like myself operates. And when I recall the times I wasn't so tired and overwhelmed, it's because usually I was so tunnel visioned on something that I shut everything else out. Like the first few years I did YouTube full time. I spent so much time single-mindedly making videos that it's like I was going through life with blinders. Did it help me get to where I am? Sure. But it was never sustainable. I'm still paying for it, and it came at the cost of so much else. What really happened was I recognized these things and wanted to try and live a better and more balanced life. And that's when things got difficult, and understandably so. I had to take a good hard look at everything in my life, and that's when I began to notice how, although I thought I had everything together, it was a house of cards already beginning to fall over. Putting in the work to try and find balance and a way to live with my brain and accept myself for who I am sucks. But I see it as a short-term pain for long-term gains. I think I could have kept grinding like I used to be. But there would have been nothing left of me at the end, having burned the entire candle. I actually try to picture it as if the life I lived before and the life I'm trying to live now are two separate trains on two separate tracks. The first train on the first track, the one I was on before, was really fast. The second train on the second track, the one I'm on now, is much slower, having a harder time accelerating. So then why do it? What's the catch? Well, I never realized that I couldn't see out of the front of the first train, and what I thought was a fast and efficient ride came to an abrupt and violent stop because I never realized there was only so much track in front of me. The whole time, unknowingly, I'd been hurtling towards my limit. Meanwhile, on the second train, I might not be at the speed I was at before, and it may take me a while to get back to that, if I ever get there, but now I'm laying tracks in front of me so that they never end. In other words, finding a more sustainable way to live life and a way to appreciate the ride as I go. So to try and simply sum all of this up, I'm trying to figure out how to live life. I'm trying to find a way to make it so that every day I wake up and feel okay, full of purpose, and every night going to bed thankful and content. Heck, it doesn't even have to be every day. That's unrealistic, but more of those days than the alternative. And I don't know why I can't figure it out yet. It's not from a lack of trying, but it seems whatever I'm trying hasn't been working. Because I do want more from life. I want to be happy and content. And I know that's not a luxury everyone gets to have, but there's nothing I would like more. Knowing that in turn, that also makes me more capable of being who I want to be for my wife, my family, and my friends. Because when I feel like I'm already spread thin and incapable of fixing myself, I have very little to in turn give and offer others, and I don't like that. I wish I was able to close these thoughts out with a declaration that everything is better, I know what I need to do and how to achieve it, and that it'll all be okay. But I can't. What I can say is that I've made a lot of progress over the past year and am constantly learning more about myself. I don't feel as if the future I hope for will never be, rather that it's just a matter of time. I have no idea how long that might be or how difficult getting there will be. But I know that as long as I keep working on and with myself, that it is possible. Because I've spent 30 years, my whole life up until now, living the way I thought I should or was told to, and it's only recently that I realized it was never sustainable nor my true self. So thinking that I can just course correct all that overnight is foolhardy. But it does leave a lot of room for uncertainty, and that scares me. Making this video scares me. Being this honest and vulnerable scares me. Making this video all the while fighting that voice in the back of my head telling me that people won't accept me, that they'll think differently of me, and that they won't like who I really am. But I know that I've been very lucky to foster such a considerate and loving community that it outweighs my doubts about opening up. And if this video helps anyone in any way, just one person, then it was worth it. Maybe it's someone who feels like I do with similar questions, but has never had any answers until today. Because I want you to also know that your experience is valid. Your struggle is valid. You are uniquely you in the same way that I am uniquely me, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing. We can both learn to be nicer and more accepting of ourselves. Now, what does all this mean for Mr. Fruit? Honestly, I'm not sure. I'm not quitting YouTube or content creation or anything like that. Not yet. I still love this, but I don't know what it needs to look like moving forward for me to work towards finding that driving force and finding that balance. This has been a question and a problem I've been struggling and wrestling with for a while now. If I'm being honest, nothing has felt the same since I had that breakdown during Fruit Summit 2022. It's as if a switch was flipped, and I've been trying to pick up the pieces ever since. If I ever have a definitive idea on what I want content to look like, I'll update you guys. But in the meantime, continue to look out for videos. I think I need to cut back some, though, and be a little pickier with what I work on. Feels like a good starting point. Perhaps less streams, too. Trying to put on a mask and entertain for up to 8 to 9 hours wears on me more than I think I've realized. So this is me. This is part of who I am. If you notice some things seem different in some content, that might just reflect more of Christian and less of Mr. Fruit at the time, but I'm going to try to not punish myself for that. It won't necessarily mean something's wrong. In fact, sometimes it could mean the opposite. I truly appreciate all of you for watching this and ultimately supporting me no matter how long you have. I don't think I exaggerate when I say YouTube saved my life, and it wouldn't have been possible without people like you.